Hi everyone, I hope you're all doing well. Today we're going to take a look at the KDA. Yes, I built this deck the other day on stream, funnily enough, but I thought we'd just have a little look through it in a video. It means I can go through it a little bit faster than if I was building the deck from scratch, of course. So, KDA has been up and down, I think, in popularity. It's always been popular in some of the tournaments with some of the 1v1 players. I think Lathans favoured it quite a bit at one point. I also think Protoss was quite keen. I've dipped in and out of it. Certainly not a favourite deck. I think its tanks were a bit weak for me, except for at one point where the T-55s were ridiculously strong. But I think overall it's a reasonably well balanced deck, and it can be played in a supporting manner if you so wish. In terms of the logistics, I've gone for my usual MTLB because it's the only one where you get 10 or more. And obviously, as you know, I like to be able to spread them about across the front line, lose a few without worrying about it, and also, you know, it means that these can be resupplied by other units. In terms of the other vehicles here, you've got the Ural and you've got the T813. 5,000 supply total, 6,000 supply total. I mean, there's plenty of supply there if you're only wanting to bring in vehicles. If you're going to bring one in, I'll bring the T813 in, and then you can resupply the MTLB at it. I mean, you can probably do that with the Ural as well, but there's just more available with that. But the truth is, the Mi-26 is here. You're going to take the Mi-26. You'd be, you know, mistaken not to. Because that's 12,000 supply on one card with two of them. And you can take two cards here, and this is what I was saying about potentially being a support deck. You could take two cards of that. You can also take a Feld Depot, obviously, but I think the fact that you get so many of those choppers is really good and could be very useful if you played this as support. In terms of the command here, I've gone with the USZ because you get three of them. The other choice for me would be SPW because it's wheeled and therefore is faster. And I like my command vehicles to be fast unless it's a tank. Okay, Infantry. A little bit less choice than some of the decks we've looked at recently. And some of the stuff I just wouldn't take here, I think, is probably the important thing to mention. But I've gone for both of the forward deployments, which are the Spetsnaz and the Spetsnaz OP. Spetsnaz good against infantry, Spetsnaz OP there to protect the Spetsnaz from any vehicles. They work well together, use them together. That is my advice. Obviously, both are special forces and can hold their own against enemy infantry anyway. But they have their specific roles, and they will support each other in that. Long range, I went for the Conkers. You do have access to the other ATGM as well, but the Conkers obviously are better. You still get 6 of them, and right now I would take them because the meta is obviously leaning towards ATGM being good. Then, towards the mid-range, I've taken the SPG-9. It is very good. It will be going up in price. I think the mistake was that it didn't go up in price in every division or every type of SPG-9 didn't go up in price this patch, but I think that will happen next patch, so bear in mind they will go up in price. But still, I think they're really good units. They can hit infantry, they can hit vehicles, they're a good deterrent, they've got a reasonable range. I think they go in most of my decks. I've also taken the 30mm grenade launcher because, as I say, I think the grenade launcher is still pretty good. Not as good as it once was, but it's still pretty effective. And I think right now it's slightly more effective than the machine guns, but watch this space as the next big patch I think is going to probably jiggle around infantry a bit more, and hopefully they will come back a bit and do a bit more damage. But we'll see, we'll see. Okay, close range stuff. Pioneer Flams or the Pioneers are your choice. Obviously, as I keep saying, satchel charges right now, not as much damage. People run away from them. If you catch someone out, you'll still do quite a bit of damage, but they're not as exciting as they were. You have to stop to throw them. The enemy's going to be running away, still firing at you potentially. It's a real difficult one, and I just can't bring myself to put those in over something else at the moment. That may change when infantry time to kill changes, so we will see. But right now, Pioneer Flams, the longer range, they're not as much damage as they used to be, but it's good enough. Then I've taken the Panzerjäger. The Panzerjäger are to go along with the Pioneer Flams, because much like the Spetsnaz OP go along with the Spetsnaz, these guys go along with the Pioneer Flams as their anti-vehicle. And they have very good anti-vehicle. You could even use the standard line infantry for that role, but I just think the Panzerjäger are a really good anti-vehicle squad, especially on maps with forests and towns where you're going to be meeting the enemy in those forests and towns more likely than not, and they can't really avoid it. Then you've got a good chance of taking out their vehicles with this. Then I've gone for the KDA Suchen. These are untrained, they are reservists. I think they are going to fall apart before they get anywhere near the enemy, but they are a 14-man squad and I am genuinely curious if they survive. They are in there purely for me testing it. I genuinely just want to test if they can make it to the enemy lines without running away. I think they're going to rout before they get there, but we will see. Because a 14-man squad means they are very meaty right now, and therefore should survive a lot of fire, but we will see. I'm thinking they're just going to run away. I then opted to take the Reservisten. I actually changed that from the other day, where I put the Vopos in. The Reservisten are a 9-man squad, the Vopos are only 6. The Vopos do have the advantage of having SMGs, so they could do more damage up close. However, they've also been put up in price, and I think when they were very cheap, they were definitely worth it. But now I kind of wonder, are the Reservisten more worth it? Because the Reservisten are actually trained and not, you know, poor experience. So they have other bonuses for the 40 points they cost. 15 points more for 3 extra men and training. I think that is probably worth it at the moment. So I've gone for the Reservisten instead. You still get 12 of them. And then I've finally gone at the end there for the Motsuchen. Both of these squads I have taken in the BTR-60 for the extra firepower. The BTR-60 obviously has the 2 machine guns, and you know, if you're not taking these machine guns, which we're obviously not, it's nice to have a little bit of fire support for your forces as they run in. Cleverly placed in forests or around towns, they can provide a lot of medium range fire support for your infantry. So don't underestimate them, just be careful with them and you will keep them alive. Artillery has some good and bad options. And yes, you could play as a support deck and bring in a lot of artillery if you wanted. I've gone for the mortars because I always like to have some mortars in there, and you only have one choice here, but you can bring 3 cards of them if you really want. The D30 122mm cannon, not really excited by that. I mean, it fires pretty fast and it's got a reasonable amount of damage. I think this one, on the basis it fires fast, isn't bad. But for me, I'd rather have the 152mm. I mean, yeah, it takes a bit longer to aim, but it does a lot more damage with the HE. So I went for one of those. I think there's definitely room to take more than one set here. But I wanted to try out the MFRW BM21 Napalm Launcher, because I've seen it used in some 10v10s very effectively. So I am wanting to try it out and see how effective it is at clearing towns and clearing forests. As I say, I've seen it used a little bit recently, and similar ones used recently to very good effect. So that's why that's in there, because I want to test it. The cluster one, I'm not sure how that performs. It has less HE than the Smirch, but it has the same penetration. So I don't know if it would do the same damage to vehicles overall. Smirch, obviously a hefty unit. I have this in one of my decks to test it as counter battery artillery, especially useful, I imagine, against the slow moving toad stuff. I had it used against me, or something similar used against me, and it was very effective because I didn't spread my guns out. That was my mistake. I've learnt since then. But yes, other options here. The RM70, I'd give it a miss. They're not great right now. You know, they're just like the Grad launchers in general. Not great. I think there is going to be a rejiggle of all the multi-rocket launchers in the near future, or hopefully in the future. So some will get buffed, some will get nerfed. They will be readjusted to be more balanced, basically. Malika fires too slow, does a lot of damage though if you're that way inclined. Tanks, reasonable amount of choices in this deck. Reasonable amount of choices. Not the heaviest tanks, but I think, you know, there's enough here to do a reasonable job, and I don't think you need to rely on any heavier tanks from allies. I think you can get by with what you've got. You've got the MT-12, which is a very good gun at the moment. Obviously, that might get rejiggled in the future, but at the moment, its armor is obviously infantry, or it's treated as an infantry unit, and therefore is very secure in forests, and it has the nice long-range missile. Then we've got the T62 ranked up, again with the missile T62M, very nice. The T62M1, very similar, slightly cheaper because it doesn't have the missile, but again, just a solid medium tank. T55 command tank, because I like to have a command tank, especially when I don't have an infantry commander. And then also the T55A as my spammable tank. A little bit more expensive than the T34, but I feel like it just has a little bit more staying power. Some people love the T34 and take that. I'm not a big fan. There was a period where the PT-76B and the T34 could be moved in en masse and do a load of damage to the enemy. I don't think they're quite as good at that anymore, but I think they can still be used to mass push an area. But that's my choice there. Otherwise, I mean, the vehicles available, I'm not too excited by. I would possibly consider taking the D44 on some maps where you're basically acting in a defensive role. But I think the selection there is pretty solid. Unless you want something really cheap that you can try and spam with. And that is available there. Recon, not a lot of choice here. Very limited choice. Spetsnaz Gru go in because of the ground surveillance radar. Alf Clara go in because numbers more than anything else, and I like to have plenty of infantry. And I've taken the MI2 because I do like in most decks to have a recon chopper. The other options here, some people like the BRDM2. I'm not a huge fan of it personally. It is obviously mobile. It's not affected by AntiAir, so in that sense it's better than a chopper because it can get up pretty fast, but I'm quite happy using my infantry recon most of the time. Okay, in terms of the AntiAir, we've got the Strela. Obviously, we like a man pad, get 12 of them. Great. Not the best, the Eagle's better, but it'll do. Then we've got the Buck. We're definitely taking a Buck. Obviously, you only get 2 of them. You need to babysit, babysit, babysit. Unless you're playing completely supportive role, and then you could take another card of them, I guess. I've then taken the Osa for backup to that. The problem with the Osa is it is radar, so you have to babysit that as well. I prefer the Strela myself because then I don't have to babysit it. In lieu of the Strela, I've taken this. It's a Spag, and it doesn't have radar. But obviously against choppers, it's going to do a lot of stress damage, so that's why that's in there. You might build this differently. I wanted a variety, and that's why I went with that. Helicopters, you get a few choices here. It's not a terrible deck for that. Quite an expensive Mi-24P. I've gone with that myself. It's not my first choice in most decks, but it's my only ECM chopper here, so I decided to take it. Just so I can use it in a defensive way when maybe there are some enemy air defenses there, because it'll take a hit. It might dodge a couple of missiles. You just got to be careful with it. And then I've taken the Rocket 2 for defensive purposes. They're very good at clearing out infantry, stun locking vehicles, while something else does the killing. Aircraft, quite a lot of choice here. It's kind of limited when it comes to anti-air though. The only anti-air is the MiG-23 MF. It does have a long-range missile though, which is the main thing. So you get 3 of those on a card. It'll do. It will fulfill that purpose. Then I've gone for the MiG-23 anti-tank. Good anti-tank choice. You also have the choice of the MiG-27M there. Let's have a look and compare them. So price is a bit high for the MiG-27. The gun is better on the MiG-27. Why did I take that instead of the MiG-27? I'm really confused. There you go, guys. You've got me. I don't know why I decided to take the MiG-23 instead of the MiG-27. I guess it's a lot cheaper, but the MiG-27 has a better gun. It's slightly more accurate. You get 3 instead of 4. Its speed is less. I suppose that's a factor, the fact the speed is less. You know, I'm going to switch that out. I'm taking the MiG-27. I don't know why I took the MiG-23. I need to watch my stream back and see what made me take the MiG-23 instead of the MiG-27 for that role? I'm genuinely not sure, guys. There must have been a reason for it in the back of my mind, but I have to have a think about that. Okay. I also took the seed because you're going to need seed to allow your aircraft to operate, really. I went for the Su-17M4 rocket attack because it's got those nice big rockets and it's got 20 of them. Obviously, it's also got the cannon and some anti-air, so it's a little bit of versatility. I went for the MiG-27 HE bomber. It's got 4 500kg bombs, good for clearing a building, potentially for doing a damage to a tank as well. And I also went for the MiG-21 BIS Rocket 2. The reason I went for this is because I want to test out the 240mm rockets. I want to see how much damage they do to vehicles. Otherwise, you know, there's a couple of other choices. 250kg bombs, not great at the moment. Napalm, certainly an option. Lots of napalm, but we already have napalm and artillery, so not bothered about that. The HE bomber there, obviously a lot more bombs, but a lot more expensive. So that's why I didn't opt for that. And then you've got a cluster down at the bottom there. I think we've got enough tanks and anti-tank elsewhere in the deck rather than take that here. So there you go, KDA. Do you build it any differently? Infantry, again, is one of those areas where I think there's some stuff you definitely want to take, like the Spetsnaz, but then there's a bit of variety at the other end when it comes to the line infantry type stuff. But I think you could build this as a very supportive deck as well, rather than cover all like I have. I think you could very much focus in on anti-air, artillery, logistical support. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. Thanks very much for watching. I'll see you all soon.